do you deal with mistakes? Because mistakes are part and parcel with being human. We do it all the time, and you know you do it. The thing also about mistakes though, and also being human, is that we don't like to admit that we make them. And that's a very understandable thing. It's a natural bias to protect oneself. It's a natural bias to sort of get around the social insecurity that comes with making a mistake. Now, when you add money to that, when you add investing to that, that mistake gets amplified. That feeling, that soft issue that comes with it gets amplified even further. And it's such an issue sometimes in money that has its own, what we refer to, fallacy, which is sunk costs. And you've probably heard of it, but the most telling sunk cost is that it's not just an individual person, it can become a group, a state, or a sovereign problem as well. And that's why sunk cost is sometimes referred to as the Concorde fallacy. For those of you that can't remember your history, Concorde was the aviation giant that was a sunk cost from the day it basically started. Back in the 1960s, when the British and French governments, through their respective aeronautical agencies, put this together, the budget at the time was £1.5 billion. That's back in 1960s. By the time they actually manufactured them, got through all of the issues, and actually got the things into the air, which was the late 60s, early 70s, they'd spent £9.3 billion and had only made 20 of them. They persisted and persisted and persisted with an airline that was costing 30 times its cheapest equivalent for the same routes. By the time it unfortunately went down with the horrible downing of the Air France flight in 2003, took another year before BA, British Airways, finally gave up. And between the 1960s and 2004, when it finally finished, the estimate was that it had lost over £190 billion in its entire life cycle. That is sunk costs, because clearly, no matter what all the numbers were telling you, the human effort, the amount of time, the amount of capital from an actual intellectual property basis that had been spent on Concorde was too great to give up, despite the fact that clearly the whole project was a mistake from the beginning, despite how exciting it was. So then relay that to yourself. What project, what effort, what time, what overall emotion are you putting into something right now that, if you're really honest with yourself, is not giving you the return that it needs? And that's what I also need to point out here. It's not just a capital thing. It's not just an investment, because capital can be used that, although it might be losing, can actually give you a personal gain. Sunk cost is a bigger spread than that. It goes across emotion, it goes across time, it goes across belief, and it also goes across capital. The next question that comes with all that, how do you actually get out of it? How do you actually accept that you've sunk cost into a project that isn't working? And this is the next thing. It's actually being, first and foremost, honest with yourself. But secondly, it's also about looking at it from a past cost and a future benefit. And what I mean by that, going, this cost, what else could I be doing with it into the future? If I stopped putting the capital, emotion, time, etc. into this project, and I went to another project that I could actually get an advancement out of, that cost can be offset. So instead of losing constantly and constantly and constantly, you take your loss, you crystallize it, but then you look forward and go, okay, the future gains that I get from the project that's actually benefiting me can offset the loss that I've had in that sunk cost. It requires a lot of self-control and a bit of belief to do it, but it is the way to break out of sunk costs, because we all make mistakes. Mistakes are part and parcel of life. Money mistakes and sunk cost mistakes are also part and parcel of life. But what you've got to do is break the past and look to the future.